My name is Mary J. Lay. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a renewable energy consultant. Basically, I optimize wind turbine efficiency for farms across the Midwest. Technical work, numbers, data. Truth that does not change depending on who tells the story. The man on the witness stand was Nolan Whitmore, 32, my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, if he got what he wanted. He worked as a corporate training specialist, teaching executives how to communicate effectively. He was very good at his job. Right now, he was using every skill he had to destroy me. Can you describe what the marriage was like in those final months? Brendan Colfax, Nolan's attorney, asked. Brendan was sharp, mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of lawyer who did not take cases he believed he could lose. Nolan lowered his eyes. His hands twisted together in his lap. His voice trembled right on cue. It was suffocating, he said. I felt like I was walking on eggshells constantly. Mary monitored everything I did, where I went, who I talked to. She demanded receipts for every purchase, even coffee. Lie. We had joint accounts. He had his own credit card. I never asked to see a single receipt. Did there come a point where her behavior escalated? Brendan asked. Yes. Nolan swallowed hard. Perfect timing. There was a night in February. We had an argument about something small. I don't even remember what. But she wouldn't let it go. She followed me from room to room, screaming at me until almost 2 a.m. I was terrified. Lie. That night did not exist. In February, I was in Fargo for a week-long turbine assessment. I had hotel receipts, flight records, client emails, and 3 people who could confirm I was nowhere near our house. But I did not say anything, because this was not the moment. My attorney, Patricia Gaines, sat beside me with a yellow legal pad. She had not written a single word. She simply watched Nolan the way a hawk watches something that has not yet realized the sky belongs to someone else. Patricia was in her 50s. Silver hair pulled back tight, eyes sharp enough to make people lower their voices. When I hired her 3 months ago, she asked me one question. Do you want to win? Or do you want to fight? I told her I wanted to end this. She smiled and said, Good answer. And your friends? Brendan continued. Did they notice changes in you? They tried to reach out, Nolan said, voice cracking softly. But Mary would make it difficult. She'd question why I was seeing them, imply they were bad influences. Eventually, I just stopped trying. It was easier than dealing with the aftermath. More lies. Nolan's friends were mostly work acquaintances from corporate events. We hosted dinner parties, game nights, backyard cookouts. I never questioned who he spent time with. I still did not react. The gallery was eating it up. I could feel their judgment against my back. Some woman, too, rose behind me, gasped, when Nolan described the screaming incident. Nolan knew how to work a room. It was literally what he got paid to do. Brendan walked him through more incidents. A plate I allegedly threw against a wall. Never happened. A weekend I supposedly refused to let him leave the house. I was in Milwaukee that weekend for a conference. He went to a spa with his brother. Each lie was specific, detailed, believable, and I counted every single one. Because in about 18 hours, when Patricia presented our case, every word Nolan spoke would collapse under the weight of the truth he never knew I had been collecting. For 3 months, I had been building something, not a defense, a systematic destruction of credibility, so complete there would be nothing left for him to salvage. Brendan asked his final question, the emotional crescendo. Nolan, what do you hope to achieve from these proceedings? Nolan looked directly at me. Tears slipped down his face. His voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried perfectly. I just want to be free, to feel safe again. Behind me, someone sniffled. Judge Holloway looked sympathetic. Brendan looked satisfied. And Nolan looked like someone who thought he had already won. Brendan let Nolan's final words hang in the courtroom like smoke. Then he turned to Judge Holloway and said, No further questions, Your Honor. The judge nodded and called a brief recess. 15 minutes. The courtroom emptied slowly, people whispering as they passed behind me. I heard fragments. Poor man. She looks so calm. That's scary. Hope he gets everything. I stood, straightened my jacket, and followed Patricia into a consultation room down the hall. She did not ask if I was okay. She did not pat my hand or offer soft comfort. That was not why I hired her. She opened her laptop, reviewed the timeline one more time, and said, "They'll bring in witnesses after the break. Probably his brother. Maybe a coworker. They need corroboration." "Let them," I said. Patricia smiled without warmth. "That's what I like to hear." When we returned, Brendan called Nolan's brother to the stand. Darren Whitmore. I had met him maybe 6 times in 6 years. He was the kind of man who avoided eye contact when he knew something was wrong but did not want the responsibility of knowing it. He shifted as he was sworn in, then sat with his hands clasped too tightly. "Did you notice changes in your brother during his marriage?" Brendan asked. "Yes," Darren said. "He became withdrawn, stopped calling as much. When we did talk, he seemed on edge." "Did he confide in you about what was happening?" "Not directly at first, but I could tell something was wrong. The way he apologized for everything second-guessed himself. That wasn't the Nolan I grew up with. It was good testimony. Vague enough to be difficult to disprove. Emotional enough to sound authentic. The problem was simple. Darren had not witnessed anything. He had only believed what Nolan fed him, drop by drop, until the lie felt like his own memory." Patricia wrote one short note, then stopped. Next came Henry from Kinetic Solutions, the firm where Nolan ran corporate training workshops. Henry testified about seeing bruises on Nolan's wrists back in March. He tried to cover them with long sleeves, Henry said. But when he reached for a folder, I saw them. When I asked, he got defensive and said he bumped into a door. The bruises were real. That part mattered. They came from a kickboxing class Nolan took every Tuesday evening. I knew because Patricia had the gym attendance records showing he was there the night before Henry saw them. But again, this was not the moment. Brendan introduced exhibits next. Text messages between Nolan and Darren, heavily edited, showing Nolan expressing concern about my behavior. Photos of Nolan looking distressed, taken on his phone, metadata technically intact. What that metadata also showed, if anyone cared to read it properly, was that all 5 photos had been taken within a 15-minute span on the same afternoon. Different poses, different angles. Same manufactured sadness. Then came a journal entry, handwritten, describing the plate-throwing incident that never happened. The date was March 15th. I was in Milwaukee from March 14th to 17th. Medical records followed, treatment for anxiety beginning in January. His therapist's notes mentioned significant life stressors. Each piece landed like evidence. Each piece made the narrative look tighter, airtight. Or it would have been, if any of it were true. 3 months earlier, I came home early from a canceled client meeting. It was a Tuesday, around 3 in the afternoon. Nolan's car was in the driveway. I heard his voice coming from the home office as soon as I stepped inside. "The recording shows exactly what we need," he said. "She'll never see it coming." I froze outside the door. Then I heard a woman laugh softly through the speaker. "And the journal entries?" "Backdated," Nolan said. "I've been working on the handwriting consistency." I stopped breathing. "Trust me, Valerie," he continued. "By the time I file, Mary won't have a leg to stand on." Valerie. I did not know who she was then. I did not open the door. I did not scream. I did not confront him. I backed away, picked up my laptop bag like I had forgotten something, and left. Over the next week, I watched, really watched. Staged arguments where Nolan pulled out his phone halfway through, recording only my reactions and stopping whenever I stayed calm. Texts to people I had never met, painting me as controlling. A hidden laptop in the garage, with a document titled Timeline, Final, Doc X. I read every word, 8 months of planning, manufacture abuse narrative, create paper trail, file restraining order, divorce, take the house, retirement accounts, spousal support. Then Valerie moves in once the dust settles. I could have tried to save the marriage, but that document told me the truth. Nolan was not my husband anymore. He was running a con, so I made a decision. Let him think he was winning. Give him nothing to suspect. Build a case so airtight that when the truth came out, there would be no recovery. Back in the courtroom, Brendan finally stood and said, "Your Honor, the plaintiff rests." Judge Holloway looked at Patricia. "Does the defense wish to cross-examine any witnesses?" Patricia did not even stand. "No, Your Honor. We'll present our case shortly." For the first time all morning, uncertainty flickered across Nolan's face. He had expected a fight. Instead, he got silence. Judge Holloway checked her watch and said we would reconvene after lunch. 1 hour. Nolan stood with Brendan beside him, and for a moment he looked almost disappointed, like the silence from our side had stolen some pleasure from his victory. He had spent the morning building a cage around me, one careful lie at a time, and I had simply sat there, breathing evenly, letting him finish the architecture. In the hallway, people avoided looking directly at me. That was the strange thing about false accusations. They did not need proof to change the temperature around you. A whisper could make strangers step aside, like you carried something contagious. Patricia and I walked past them into the bright, cold air outside the courthouse and bought coffee from a cart near the steps. We did not discuss strategy. There was nothing left to discuss. The plan had been set for weeks. Across the plaza, I saw Nolan and Brendan sitting at an outdoor table. Nolan was on his phone, probably texting Valerie about how perfectly the morning had gone. Brendan was reviewing papers with the relaxed posture of a man who believed the hard part was over. Patricia noticed where I was looking. He has no idea what's coming. "Good," I said. At exactly 2 o'clock, we were back in the courtroom. The gallery was smaller now, but the important people remained. Darren. Henry. A few friends who had believed Nolan's trembling voice. Judge Holloway entered, and everyone rose, then sat. She looked at Patricia. "Counselor Gaines, does the defense wish to present evidence?" Patricia stood and smoothed her jacket. "Yes, Your Honor. The defense would like to present evidence that recontextualizes the plaintiff's entire narrative." Brendan was on his feet immediately. "Your Honor, we were not provided proper discovery for—" Patricia did not even glance at him. "We submitted our evidence list 48 hours ago, per Minnesota court rules. Counsel received it electronically and signed confirmation of receipt." Brendan's jaw tightened. He had received it. He had simply assumed it would be ordinary divorce evidence. Bank statements, texts, nothing unusual. "The objection is noted and overruled," Judge Holloway said. "Proceed." Patricia walked to the bailiff and handed him a USB drive. "We begin with audio evidence. A recording from November 14th of last year, taken from the plaintiff's residence. One-party consent recording, fully legal under Minnesota statute." The judge nodded. "Play it." For 1 second, there was only static. Then Nolan's voice filled the courtroom, clear and unmistakable. "Okay, let me try that again. I need to sound more scared when I say the part about her blocking the door." Someone in the gallery gasped. Nolan's voice continued. "No, wait. More emotion. Like this." A pause. Then he shifted into a trembling whisper. "I was terrified. I didn't know what she would do next." Then he laughed. "God, I sound like I'm auditioning for a Lifetime movie." The air changed instantly. The sympathy that had wrapped itself around Nolan all morning evaporated. People looked at each other, confused first, then horrified. Nolan's face drained of color. He turned toward Brendan, but Brendan looked like someone had just pulled the floor out from under him. Patricia let the silence hold for 5 full seconds. "This recording is time-stamped 3 months before the plaintiff filed for divorce. He is alone in the home office, rehearsing testimony and practicing emotional delivery. We have 17 similar recordings." Brendan stood again, but his voice cracked at the edges. "Your Honor, this is clearly taken out of context. My client may have been practicing. Counselor Colfax, Judge Holloway said sharply. I will hear the defense's full presentation before addressing objections. Patricia nodded to the bailiff. Next file. This one was a phone call. Nolan's voice again. Trust me, Valerie. The journal entries are dated back over 6 months. The photos look authentic. She'll have no way to prove they're staged. A woman's voice answered, low and casual. And the financial stuff? All moved to the account under my mother's name, Nolan said. Clean enough. Once the restraining order is in place, Mary won't be able to fight anything. The courtroom did not shift this time. It detonated. This was no longer a messy divorce. This was conspiracy, fraud, and premeditated deception with an accomplice. Judge Holloway leaned forward. The property division panel looked stunned. Henry had one hand over his mouth. Darren stared at Nolan like he was seeing his brother for the first time. Patricia turned to the judge. Valerie Hale is the plaintiff's colleague at Kinetic Solutions. They have been romantically involved for 11 months. The evidence will show she assisted in creating the false abuse narrative and in hiding marital funds. She projected the first bank slide. These are Mary Lay's retirement accounts in January. 6 figures accumulated over years. Another click. These are the same accounts in April. Withdrawals totaling $127,000 made by Nolan Whitmore without Mary's knowledge. Brendan tried weakly. Marital assets can be managed by either spouse. Transparently, Patricia said. Not hidden. Not transferred through an individual account under Nolan's birth surname, then moved again to an account belonging to his mother while he filed a sworn affidavit claiming total marital assets of $89,000. Judge Holloway began taking notes. Not polite notes. Dangerous notes. Nolan stared at the screen, his morning tears gone. What remained was not fear of me. It was fear of being found out. Patricia moved without rushing. That was what made it worse for Nolan. She did not attack him. She did not raise her voice. She simply placed one fact after another in front of the court until the story he had built started collapsing under its own weight. The next slide filled the courtroom screen with recovered text messages. Green bubbles, timestamps, names, dates, all pulled from cloud backup under court-authorized subpoena. These messages were deleted from the plaintiff's phone on April 10th, Patricia said, one day after he filed the restraining order. She read the first one aloud. Once the restraining order is in place, she can't contest anything. We just have to make the abuse look credible enough. A whisper moved through the gallery. Patricia read the second message. The key is consistency. If you say she grabbed your wrist during the argument on March 3rd, I need to corroborate that I saw the bruise when we met March 5th. Then Valerie's reply appeared beneath it. Right. And the bruise was actually from when? Nolan's answer sat on the screen like a knife laid flat on a table. Kickboxing class. But that doesn't matter. The timeline is what matters. Henry, the co-worker who had testified about seeing bruises, went pale. His face shifted from concern to shock to humiliation. He was realizing in real time that what he had seen was not false, but the story attached to it was. Nolan had used him like a prop with a pulse. Patricia turned slightly toward the judge. Mr. Henry Voss testified earlier that he saw bruises on Nolan Whitmore's wrists and believed they were connected to abuse by my client. Gym records show Mr. Whitmore attended kickboxing class the evening before those bruises were observed. These texts show he knew exactly where they came from. Judge Holloway's pen moved faster. Patricia continued, moving to the photographic evidence submitted by the plaintiff. The 5 photos Nolan had presented earlier appeared on the screen. Nolan sitting in dim light, eyes red, shoulders hunched, looking frightened and exhausted. This morning, those photos had done damage. They had made people in the gallery soften toward him. Now they look different, not sad, but arranged. These appear to show a man in genuine distress, Patricia said. However, the metadata tells a different story. The technical data appeared beside the images. All 5 photos were taken on March 22nd. Timestamps: dos, 40, 6 p.m., dos, 50, 1 p.m., Dos. 50, 3 p.m. Dos. 50, 8 p.m. 2 p.m. 5 photos, Patricia said. Different poses, different angles, same 15-minute period. This was not a collection of candid evidence over time. It was a staged photo session designed to manufacture a pattern. Nolan whispered something to Brendan. Brendan did not answer. He was staring at the screen like he had aged 10 years in the last 20 minutes. Then Patricia played the audio Nolan had submitted as evidence of me screaming at him. My voice sounded harsh, clipped, ugly. Enough. Just stop. That was the version he had wanted the court to hear. Short, damning, convenient. Patricia let it end, then looked at the judge. Now the full recording. The room listened as the missing 15 minutes unfolded. Nolan's voice came first, smooth and poisonous. Your father would be ashamed of the woman you became. My father had died 2 years earlier of a heart attack. Nolan knew exactly where that blade would land. On the recording, I stayed silent. Nolan continued. He raised a failure, a woman who hides behind work because she doesn't know how to be loved. My recorded voice was low. Don't talk about my dad. You didn't even know him. Nolan laughed softly. I know enough. I know he died disappointed. A few people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. Then, after nearly 15 minutes of deliberate provocation, my voice finally rose. Enough! Just stop! Patricia paused the recording. That is where Mr. Whitmore's exhibit began. At my client's breaking point, after he removed the entire context of his own provocation, she recalled Darren to the stand. Nolan's brother looked terrified now. Not of me, but of having to stand inside the truth without shelter. Mr. Whitmore, Patricia said, when you testified earlier that Nolan seemed withdrawn and frightened, did he ever explicitly tell you Mary hurt him? Darren swallowed. Not directly. Did you ever personally witness Mary threaten, strike, or restrain Nolan? No. So your testimony was based entirely on what Nolan told you and how he appeared afterward? Yes. And you believed him because he is your brother? Darren's voice barely carried. Yes. Patricia nodded. No further questions. The gallery had gone completely silent. The same people who had leaned toward Nolan's pain that morning were now leaning away from him, creating distance the way people do when they realize sympathy has made them complicit. Patricia returned to our table and picked up one final folder. Your Honor, she said, the defense has one final piece of evidence, a continuous, unedited home security recording from April 9th, the night Mr. Whitmore claims my client threatened him with violence. Nolan's eyes widened, and for the first time that day, he looked truly afraid. Brendan was on his feet before Patricia even handed over the USB drive. Your Honor, we were not aware of any security system. His voice had lost its polish. It sounded thinner now, scraped down by panic. Patricia did not look at him. It is in the evidence list counsel received, she said calmly. Page 4, line 17, home security footage, April 9th, 8:47 p.m. to 9:23 p.m. Judge Holloway checked her copy, then nodded. It is listed. Objection overruled. Patricia gave the drive to the bailiff. This footage is continuous and unedited. Timestamp verified by the security company. It shows the kitchen and living room of the defendant's residence on the night the plaintiff claims Mary Leigh threatened him with violence, the same incident that formed the basis of his restraining order. The screen went black. Then the video loaded. Black and white footage. Kitchen. Timestamp in the corner. April 9th, 8:47 p.m. I was at the sink washing dishes. Audio clear. Nolan entered the frame. On the recording, I glanced at him, then looked back down at the plate in my hands. We need to discuss your complete inability to listen to anything I say, Nolan said. My recorded voice was calm. Okay, what do you want to talk about? See? That. Right there. That dismissive tone. I'm literally asking what you want to discuss. He stepped closer. You're never present, always thinking about work. Your precious turbines matter more than this marriage. I watched myself set down the dish and turn toward him. That's not true, but I'm not doing this right now. Of course you're not, he snapped, because you never want to do anything that requires actual emotional investment. I turned back to the sink, kept washing. He followed. What? You're just going to ignore me now? I'm giving you space to say what you need to say without escalating. Escalating? He repeated louder. I'm trying to have a conversation. It went on like that for minutes, Nolan's voice rising, mine staying level. He accused me of caring more about contracts than our marriage. He accused me of having an affair with a client. I did not answer that one. Then he said something I had almost forgotten. You're just like your father, cold, buried in work, emotionally useless. On screen, I stopped. My father had been dead 2 years. Nolan knew that grief was not something to touch unless he wanted to leave a mark. Don't, I said quietly. Don't what? Tell the truth? Nolan stepped closer. He spent his whole life working and still died with nothing but disappointment behind him. You're doing the exact same thing. Nolan! Stop! He moved directly into my space. What are you going to do, Mary? Hit me? Go ahead. Give me a reason. The courtroom was absolutely silent. On screen, I shook my head and stepped back. I'm not doing this. I walked toward the door. Nolan grabbed my arm. I gently removed his hand. The movement was clear, slow, unmistakable. Then I left the frame. For a moment, the kitchen was empty except for Nolan standing there alone. Then he looked around, pulled out his phone, opened the front-facing camera, ran both hands through his hair until it looked messy, rubbed under his eyes until they reddened, and hit record. His voice changed instantly. Shaky, frightened, practiced. She just threatened me, said if I didn't stop pushing her, she'd make me regret it. I'm scared. I don't know what she's going to do. He stopped, checked the playback, frowned, and recorded again with slightly different wording. Then a third time. When he was satisfied, he lowered the phone. The video ended. Nobody moved. This was not the silence from the morning, when people were deciding whether to pity Nolan. This was the silence of a room realizing it had watched a man manufacture evidence in real time. Patricia let 10 seconds pass. Then she said, "This is the incident Mr. Whitmore testified about under oath. The incident he used to obtain a restraining order. The incident he claimed left him terrified for his safety." Judge Holloway looked at Nolan, then at Brendan, then back at the blank screen. When she spoke, her voice was colder than anything I had heard all day. "Counselor Colfax, does your client wish to address this evidence?" Brendan bent toward Nolan, whispering urgently. Nolan shook his head, words spilling too fast to hear. Then Brendan stood. "Your Honor, my client maintains that the overall atmosphere throughout the marriage—" "Counselor," the judge cut in. "I just watched your client fabricate evidence on video. I'm not asking about atmosphere. I am asking about perjury." The word landed like a dropped blade. Nolan suddenly stood. "This is insane. She planned this. She's manipulating all of you." "Mr. Whitmore," Judge Holloway said, "sit down. You have said quite enough today." He sat. Patricia stood. "Your Honor, the defense moves to dismiss all claims filed by the plaintiff on grounds of fraud upon the court. We also request sanctions for perjury, submission of falsified evidence, and abuse of process. Additionally, we will file counterclaims for malicious prosecution, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and recovery of all legal fees." Judge Holloway removed her glasses. "We are in recess until tomorrow morning at 9. Counselor Gaines, prepare your motion for sanctions. Counselor Colfax, I strongly suggest you speak seriously with your client about the direction of these proceedings." Then she looked at Nolan. "I am also referring this matter to the county attorney for potential criminal investigation." The gavel struck, and Nolan went completely pale. People started filing out of the courtroom in a different silence than the one they had entered with. In the morning they had looked at me like I was something dangerous wrapped in a pressed suit. Now they avoided Nolan's table completely, eyes sliding away as if shame could be contagious. Darren walked past without speaking. Henry looked once at Nolan, then at me, and his face carried the stunned humiliation of someone realizing he had helped hold up a lie. I stood, straightened my jacket, and gathered my bag. Patricia was already packing her briefcase, efficient as ever, like she had not just detonated an entire courtroom with 3 USB drives and a timeline. Nolan stayed frozen at the plaintiff's table. Brendan Colfax gathered papers with shaking hands, probably already calculating how much he had known, how much he should have known, and how far he needed to distance himself before the county attorney started asking questions. I did not look at Nolan as I passed him. I did not need to. The truth had already looked at him for me. In the hallway, Patricia checked her phone and said, "Brendan will call tonight. They'll want to settle." "I know. How do you want to handle it?" I thought about the hidden laptop in the garage, the document titled Timeline. Final docs, the months he had spent planning to take my house, my money, my reputation, and maybe my freedom. I thought about Valerie Hale's voice on the recordings, calm and amused, like my life was a corporate exercise in persuasion. "Complete capitulation," I said, "or we go to trial and let the county attorney add whatever charges they think fit." Patricia smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Behind us, through the courtroom doors, I heard Nolan crying. Not the soft, performed tears from the witness stand, real ones, messy ones. The kind that came when consequence finally touched skin. Patricia called me at 7:43 the next morning. I was in my hotel room, coffee in hand, looking out at downtown Minneapolis, through glass, streaked with early rain. "Brendan reached out," she said. "They want to settle. Terms? Complete withdrawal of all claims. No alimony. No asset division, beyond what he is legally entitled to, which after accounting for the fraudulently moved funds is essentially nothing. He pays your legal fees in full. And you want the restraining order? I want no contact, ever. I'll add it. We arrived at the courthouse at 8:45 and were directed to a conference room instead of the courtroom. Nolan was already there with Brendan. He looked like he had not slept. Eyes swollen, shirt wrinkled, hair pulled back without care. The polished man from the witness stand was gone. What remained was smaller, almost ordinary, and that somehow made the betrayal uglier. Brendan slid the settlement agreement across the table. Patricia reviewed it first, then nodded to me. I read every line. Everything we demanded was there. Nolan tried to speak. "Mary, I did not look up from the papers. Sign it." My voice was not angry. It was not emotional. It was finished. He signed. The restraining order was mutual on paper, because courts like symmetry, but everyone in that room knew only one of us had built a fake abuse case to destroy the other. Patricia collected the documents. Brendan looked relieved this part was ending, though the criminal part was only beginning. Outside the conference room, Patricia briefed me. "The county attorney is moving forward. Perjury charges are likely. Maybe reduced charges, probation, restitution. But it will be on his record." "And Valerie?" "Kinetic Solutions terminated her yesterday. They issued an internal statement about ethical violations. 2 of her former partners have contacted counsel after hearing what came out in court. Looks like this was not her first time helping someone run this kind of play." I nodded. I did not feel satisfied. I felt complete. Over the next week, the fallout moved fast. Nolan's professional network evaporated. His LinkedIn disappeared. The corporate training world was smaller than he thought, and nobody wanted a trust-building specialist exposed for manufacturing abuse claims under oath. People who had believed him started reaching out to me. Small messages. Awkward apologies. "I should have known. I'm sorry I doubted you. I hope you can forgive me." I accepted some. I kept all of them brief. Vindication does not rebuild every bridge. Some things collapse because they were never strong enough to carry truth. I listed the house within 2 weeks. I could not stay there. Every room had a poisoned memory, every wall an echo of someone I thought I loved becoming a stranger with a strategy. Denver looked clean from a distance. Mountains, new contracts, work I could carry with me. 3 months later, a letter arrived through Patricia's office. Nolan's handwriting. I recognized it from the fake journal entries. He asked for a character reference before sentencing, said he had gotten help, said he was sorry, asked me to show mercy. I read it once. Then I burned it in my fireplace, not out of rage, not for drama, because some things deserve an ending that leaves no forwarding address. 6 months after the hearing, I was settled in Denver, new apartment, mountain view, wind projects across Colorado and New Mexico. One evening, a notification came through. Nolan had pleaded to reduce charges. 2 years probation, community service, restitution. I closed it without reading more. He was not my husband, not my enemy, not even my past anymore. People think revenge has to be loud, but the most permanent kind is quiet, systematic, documented, and irrefutable. I did not shout Nolan down. I let him perform. I counted every lie. And when the moment came, I let the truth do what truth does when it has nowhere left to hide. It does not just win arguments, it ends them.